Good afternoon. Welcome back to Encyclopedia.zone. My name is Don Jolly. I am a freelance writer and the editor-in-chief of Encyclopedia.zone, the internet's premier home for literary shitposting. My work has appeared in the Los Angeles Review of Books, the Revealer magazine, among others. And sorry about the week off. I've been working on this essay. But we've got some very exciting announcements. If you are in the New York area and you're anything like me, you love action movies, you love role-playing games, and you love the theater. So if you, once again, are in the New York area and resemble me in any way in this regard, please come out to the Chain Theater, 312 West 36th Street, New York, New York, for a live performance of Gorefest, my action movie role-playing game, which is going to be a great fucking time. We've got the best role players in Brooklyn. It's going to be like Critical Role if everybody playing was high on PCP and it was based on 1980s and 70s action movies instead of dumb fairies and crap. So please come on out. Gorefest live at the Chain Theater Saturday, September 28th, 8 p.m. And I will link more details about the event in the description below. Also, just a couple of announcements before we get started. The wonderful intro for this episode of Encyclopedia Zone was created by Wi-Fi Hermit with music by Zombie. And once again, I will provide more links in the description below. Container Core did the modification of our logo. So thank you very much for putting Calvin peeing next to the Encyclopedia Zone logo, Container Core. Original logo, of course, by Alessandro Echevarria. All right. So, with the preliminaries out of the way, let's get into it. This is The Terror. I have encountered a Thomason. It was late at night, and I was trying to catch a bus from Bedford-Stuyvesant to deeper Brooklyn, where I have lived for the past 3 months. The vending machines necessary to fill my Metro card were down. Public transportation in New York relies on a kind of temporary credit card, a thin sheet of plastic film affixed with magnetic stripe. Le Tigre has a song about it. They also have a song about Hillary Clinton, produced by Special Reunion for the 2016 election. I'm with her, goes the chorus, to the top. She's with us. She won't stop. This, too, is a Thomason. The MetroCard vendors were down as signaled by a polite text message. We are not accepting cash, change, debit card, or credit card, it said. This message is so diplomatic. It acts as if the machine is fully functional with the small exception of all its designated functions. I crossed the street to see if the Manhattan-bound subway was in better repair. It wasn't, but I'm glad I made the trip. The subway stop resembles a concrete cave, its steps smoothed into semi-natural formations by years of rain and salt dispersed by the city to prevent snow accumulation. On the walls of the station, posters are plastered advertising upcoming movies and TV shows. The old posters are not removed when the new ones are put up, so each advertisement bulges like a tree, thick with succeeding projects. Sometimes this growth must be excised, and it was the performance of this chore that revealed to me the Thomason. Some MTA employee had stripped the posters beside the broken MetroCard machines, revealing a vividly preserved advertisement for Road Trip, a Tom Green comedy vehicle released more than 19 years ago. Tom Green's rubbery face was twice the size of a normal human head. He was sneering in that aggressive way comedians did in the 90s, almost daring people to dislike him. He was also trying to look stupid. His hands were up, framing a square, and in it was the route of the titular road trip, somewhere to Austin, Texas. That is where I will be moving in less than a month. I seem incapable of staying any one place for long. William Gibson, in his novel Virtual Light, describes the Thomason like this. Thomason was an American baseball player, very handsome, very powerful. He went to the Yomiuri Giants in 1982 for a large sum of money. Then it was discovered he could not hit the ball. The writer and artisan Genpai Akasegawa appropriated his name to describe certain inexplicable monuments, pointless yet curiously art-like features of the urban landscape. When I was growing up, I read a lot of Mike Pondsmith's pen and paper role-playing game, Cyberpunk 2020. Its setting was next year, and it was filled with snippets of poetry, philosophy, and song from Pondsmith's imagined future. The future is disposable. So are you, homeboy. a saying attributed to Ripperjack, a black market doctor specializing in cybernetics. Says the netrunner Spider Murphy. Somewhere out there is a guy with half his forebrain burned out. I wonder if they ever found the body. I wonder if they'll find mine the same way. Role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons reduce literary genres to manipulable gestalts, stripping away plot specifics and character details to create a bare physics of storytelling. D&D did it with the pulp fantasy of Fritz Leiber and Jack Vance and Robert E. Howard, whereas Cyberpunk digested William Gibson, Blade Runner, Akira, The Road Warrior. Recently, William Gibson dismissed the trailer for Cyberpunk 2077, a massively budgeted video game based on Pondsmith's writing, as a 1980s-style retro future, presumably lacking the nuance or technical insights of his original cyberpunk works, Virtual Light included. What he has missed is that while his novels have held still, accumulating relevance in the world of print, Pondsmith's pulp fiction digest of the genre Gibson originated is multiplying itself into the real world. The Polish government has invested significantly in CD Projekt Red, Cyberpunk 2077's developer. They have hired musicians to realize the lyrics printed in Pondsmith's source books. As I waited for the bus that night after encountering the Thomason, I pulled a song from the network which was not supposed to exist, not really. Cyberpunk 2020 was a fantasy game because it imagined a future of fashionable cyborgs living in the shadows of a corporate oligarchy. I stood on that street corner and listened to the wires in my ears and to the voice of Johnny Silverhand. I got the chips and enhancements, got the attitude right. I got the metal beneath my skin. I'm chipping in. Earlier this month, the 18th anniversary of the terrorist attack on the World Trade Center came and went. In a few months, the war in Afghanistan will be old enough to vote. No matter its party affiliation, the past 3 administrations and their counterparts in Congress suggest that it will vote to extend itself, perhaps indefinitely, whether it wants to or not. Everyone has a 9/11 story. Most of them are about watching television. In New York, that's different. In 2015, I went to where the World Trade Center stood to listen to the Truthers. These Truthers are a group of protesters, many of whom stand beside the memorial hole erected in place of the leveled skyscrapers every Saturday, holding poster boards crammed with printouts and diagrams purporting to contain the truth of the disaster. Their problems on September 11, 2015 were twofold. First, none of them could agree what the truth was. Second, Wall Street guys projecting the aggressive energy of high school baseball players kept storming up to scream at them and slap their signs away. To the credit of the disinterested police around the site, they intervened peaceably on the truthers' behalf, kindly encouraging the angry rich to move along. Watching this, I wondered if anyone working at Lehman Brothers or Goldman Sachs will ever take a club to the jaw. I talked to a little old man with a round figure who said it was Israeli weather control satellites were responsible. I talked to another man, younger and with an activist tan, who rolled his eyes at that. We let anybody come out, he explained. His poster boards elaborated on the impossibility of Building 7's collapse absent a controlled demolition. I heard one 9/11 story that day that stuck in my mind. Another young man, quieter than the others, approached me after an angry exchange with a banker. "I was here, asshole," said the man in the suit and tie as he was shooed away. "Where were you at?" The quiet man was in his 20s. I do not remember what he looked like, other than that his hair looked wet. The sun was out that day. He might have been sweating. On 9/11/2001, the quiet man was in high school. After the towers fell, the students were released, and he made his way downtown towards the disaster. What he remembered about the day was not panic or horror. He remembered feeling like everyone in New York City, everyone in the country, everyone in the world was connected somehow. Everyone was watching the same thing. Everyone was focused on the same thing. The quiet man felt connected when those plumes of ash surged through Manhattan. It was my impression that the feeling never came again, at least not as strongly, and not in the same way. And perhaps this was the reason why he had dedicated every Saturday of the succeeding years to trying to keep that sense of connection alive, to make sure that 9/11 remained an ongoing narrative and not settled history. Pete Buttigieg, the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, made a similar point at ABC's Democratic primary debate, on September 12th of this year. All day I've been thinking about September 12th, he said, when for a moment we came together as a country. Imagine if we had been able to sustain that unity. Imagine what would be possible right now. Buttigieg has an impeccable resume. In 2000, when Road Trip was in theaters, he was named valedictorian of his class at St. Joseph High School in the town he would later lead. He won first prize in an essay contest held in honor of John Fitzgerald Kennedy's famously ghost-written book, Profiles in Courage, by the JFK Presidential Library. Its subject was a senator from Vermont named Bernie Sanders. Buttigieg attended Harvard for a BA in History and Literature. He served as president for the Student Advisory Committee for the Harvard Institute of Politics. He graduated magna cum laude and was awarded a Rhodes Scholarship to study at Oxford. Afterwards, he spent 3 years at McKinsey & Company, one of the world's largest and most prestigious management consulting firms. This detail earns one line of his Wikipedia page. More space is devoted to his internship at a small NBC affiliate. In 2009, he began training to serve as an officer in naval intelligence. Buttigieg has frequently cited this service on the campaign trail. On August 3rd this year, he appeared at a forum for presidential candidates held in Las Vegas by the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Workers. There, a reporter asked him to comment on the recent mass shooting in El Paso, Texas. "I'm professionally qualified in counterterrorism," Buttigieg told the reporter. "It was my specialty in the military, and I know a little bit about what's involved. I specialized in terrorism abroad, but there's a lot that would, sadly, be applicable at home, too." A little more than a month later, on ABC's debate stage, he articulated in his usual impeccable style a position that has become commonplace among presidential candidates, from Kerry, whose 2004 campaign employed Buttigieg for a number of months, through to today's Democratic field. "Today," he said, "on September 12th, you could be 18 years old enough to serve, and not have been born on 9/11. We have got to put an end to endless war." While Buttigieg worked on the Kerry campaign, he was primarily employed as a conference director for the Cohen Group, a strategic consulting firm with an international focus founded by Clinton's former Secretary of Defense, William Cohen. I would tell you what that group has to say about themselves, but their webpage returns a 404 error. McKinsey & Company, where Buttigieg worked after leaving Oxford, maintains a more robust presence in the media. A 1993 profile in Fortune magazine described the firm as highly competitive and centrally focused on the measurable intelligence of their agents. The firm's up-and-out system culls partners from its ranks with the ruthlessness of a 3-star chef culling asparagus at a farmer's market, wrote Fortune. When in the presence of a young McKinsey partner, one gets the impression that, if plied with a cocktail or two, he might well lean across the table and suggest something awkward, like comparing SAT scores. The personality of a McKinsey consultant is an unusual blend of studied arrogance overlaying deep-seated insecurity. Still, their services are in demand. In 1993, when Fortune profiled McKinsey for its explosive growth throughout the 1980s and the successful ubiquity of its consulting brand, McKinsey was and is perceived to be the smartest collection of people in the management consulting industry, advising governments and corporations. A competitor at A.T. Kearney told Fortune it is difficult for a CEO who hires McKinsey to be challenged either by his board or the rank and file. Even in 1993, a majority of their business was international. Ken Ohame, a partner at their Tokyo branch, published a book called The Borderless World around that time. It ends with a call to realign the global economic order, followed by this postscript. This statement, the product of many dinner conversations and debates, is one we each embrace and believe to be the best possible course for all countries and governments to follow. Countries, governments, and corporations continue to employ McKinsey today. The writer Duff McDonald, whose History of McKinsey, the firm, was published in 2014, calls them perhaps the single greatest legitimizer of mass layoffs. According to the Attorney General of Massachusetts, McKinsey advised Purdue Pharmaceuticals on turbocharging OxyContin sales while countering emotional messages from mothers whose teenagers had overdosed with a proposed advertising campaign. In 2009, they suggest advancing the meme that opioids reduce stress, make patients more optimistic, and less isolated. This is fine, however. In 2018, McKinsey published a report with this title: Why We Need Bolder Action to Combat the Opioid Epidemic. Purdue Pharmaceuticals, owned by the billionaire Sackler family, declared bankruptcy a few days after Buttigieg's debate performance, wiping out nearly 2,000 opium crisis-related lawsuits. They got dispensation from the courts to pay out more than $40 million in bonuses to their executives. In examining the mechanisms of the modern world, there are a profusion of Thomassons, strange artifacts or advertisements which have outlived their purpose. Buttigieg's 9/12 moment and the unity of the quiet man are buried now in years of message and counter-message, the whole bloody legacy of American politics since the Supreme Court chose compassionate conservatism and we skipped with a smile of fake Jesus on our televised lips into a century of unimaginable disaster. My 9/11 story is about watching television. The first tower was on fire when I left the house. It collapsed in first period. Second period was biology, which, this being Texas, was taught by a football coach. On the first day of class, he announced he did not believe in evolution. Nevertheless, he promised to deliver all of the chapters of the book, each according to its state-mandated lesson plan. They can make me stand here, he said, and they can make me talk, and they can make you listen, but they can't make us believe it. When the second tower fell during his class, the coach did exactly what the lesson plan said. He passed out a worksheet and played a video on cell mitosis with CNN on mute in the background. More Thomassons. Rollin', Air Raid Vehicle, is the most popular single from rap rock group Limp Bizkit. It premiered the October following the release of Road Trip and remained on the Billboard Hot 100 charts for 17 weeks, peaking at number 65. Its video received the Best Rock Video Award from MTV. In it, Fred Durst and his band play atop the South Tower of the World Trade Center, swaggering out their manifesto. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 times 2 to the 6. Jonesin' for your fix of the Limp Bizkit mix. Stephen Dorff and Ben Stiller co-star. Limp Bizkit commemorated their single hit with the same triumphant and monstrous energy employed by Dino De Laurentiis when he remade King Kong in 1976 and had the ape climb the World Trade Center. The WTC wasn't the tallest building in the world when the remake was released. In 1933, Kong's ascent up the Empire State Building was a clear-cut domination of contemporary industrial civilization by a figure of savagery possessing an inborn sense of sadly outmoded morality. He protects Andero, he fights serfs on behalf of his mammalian counterparts, but his arrival in New York is the doom of him. He climbs the tallest building on Earth and reigns for a time as the planet's natural king, but they shoot him anyway. In 1976, the Sears Tower was taller than the World Trade Center. King Kong climbed the ladder presumably because it was in New York. In the De Laurentiis version, the symbolism is more political than mythic. Kong momentarily menaces a symbol of American post-war economic superpower and is shot in the attempt. Limp Bizkit were shot too on the South Tower because standing on top of America's 20th century economic hegemony while playing electric guitar makes you look like King fucking Kong. As I watched the second tower collapse in biology class, I heard the voice of the Texas Board of Education's mandated video. Mitosis is a process that occurs in every type of cell. Mitosis is the process by which a single cell propagates itself, dividing endlessly. Over the next few weeks during Buttigieg's 9/12 unity, I watched that happen to images of the World Trade Center. It was the most spectacular special effect in history, blowing Rick Baker's Kong right the hell out of the water. It was an act of mass murder, of course, but its iconography was repeated so often and in such grotesque detail on news broadcasts, in magazines, and on the nascent message boards of 2001 that it began to become something like a television commercial, an omnipresent image. Our empire is under threat, this image set. In spumes of flame and ashen tidal waves, a symbol of economic control was flattened, and the many thousands of deaths and injuries that resulted were treated by the media as righteous martyrs for the American cause, a spirit that nobody bothered to precisely define, but which seemed to have been violated both morally and strategically. The revenge motive in selling the war in Afghanistan to the American people was not even disguised. From this catastrophe followed a policy of constant, open belligerence by the United States toward an increasingly broad set of targets across the globe, a war against everyone, everywhere, and on whose behalf the surveillance state has rested its moral claim. America remains a Christian nation, at least insofar as its popular mythology depends on messianic martyrdom. 9/11 was a thing like Christ, and for the sake of its suffering, excuse me, 9/11 was a thing like Christ, and for the sake of its suffering icon, the government of the United States has seceded itself from the position of superpower to power broker, and done so in the name of a war against not a country or a caliphate, but a concept. This is the terror of things today. There is a quote from Cyberpunk 2020 attributed to an unidentified corporate. Money? Yeah, I got money. A new BMW Aerodyne and a penthouse in the corporate zone. All that money ain't worth frack. You play this game for power. You make a phone call, and the next thing you know, you're telling the president of some Bush League Euro nation that he'd better play it your way, or he's history. McKinsey held its company retreat last year in Kashgar, a city in western China. According to Walt Bogdanich and Michael Forsyth, writing in the New York Times, meetings took place in a cavernous banquet hall that resembled a sultan's ornate court, with a sign overhead to capture the mood. I can't keep calm. I work at McKinsey and Company, it said. Kashgar is also home to an internment camp for Uyghurs, Kazakhs, and other Muslim minorities in China. Its prisoners, according to New York Times journalists Chris Buckley and Austin Ramsey, have become the friendly face of China's Muslim internment program. China's ruling Communist Party has said in a surge of upbeat propaganda that its sprawling network of camps is providing job training and putting detainees on production lines for their own good, offering an escape from poverty, backwardsness, and the temptations of radical Islam. Presumably, they have a banner too. I can't keep calm. I'm a slave laborer for the Chinese government. McKinsey has consulted for Saudi Arabia, Erdogan's Turkey, and South Africa. In Russia, according to Bogdanich and Forsyth, it has consulted on many sectors of the Russian economy, including mining, manufacturing, oil and gas, banking, transportation, and infrastructure. A McKinsey official sat on the Russian government's energy board. McKinsey's work in China has been similarly extensive, working with 22 of the biggest state-owned companies in the Middle Kingdom, including the China Communication Construction Company, the firm which led the construction of the politically volatile artificial islands in the South China Sea. McKinsey signed China Communications in 2015. That same year, a managing partner made China's Belt and Road Initiative the subject of a keynote address for McKinsey in Beijing. Belt and Road was a Chinese state-driven project to build new infrastructure internally and in the surrounding region. McKinsey, then employed by China Communications, was hired by the Malaysian government in 2016 to consult on the possible construction of a rail line funded by Belt and Road loans from China. In an internal PowerPoint cited by Bogdanich and Forsyth, McKinsey promised that the proposed Chinese rail line would increase Malaysia's economic growth in certain regions by as much as 1.5%. Malaysia's ex-prime minister, Najib Razak, was charged with corruption and criminal breach of trust in 2018, but he loved to call that figure out. McKinsey's report to the Malaysian government also stressed the upsides of partnering with China and of building the nation-to-nation relationship. That flew in Malaysia until Sri Lanka defaulted on a port financed by Chinese loans and built by a subsidiary of China Communications. When Sri Lanka was unable to pay When Sri Lanka was unable to pay, control of the port reverted to China for 99 years. Mahathir Mohamad, Malaysia's prime minister following Razak, halted construction of the rail line McKinsey had advocated. To the Times, the firm justified its employment by both sides of the deal. Our rigorous internal policies and procedures ensure that we bring an independent perspective to all clients, said McKinsey. The rail line sits abandoned in the Malaysian jungle. huge cement pylons supporting no roadway, slowly being overgrown. This, too, is a Thomasson. Viktor Yanukovych, the disgraced former president of the Ukraine, is another former beneficiary of Mackenzie's expertise. In 2010, the Ukrainian oligarch Rinat Akhmetov hired Mackenzie to burnish Yanukovych's image, along with a firm run by lobbyist and Trump aide Paul Manafort. Mackenzie's role was to provide credibility to Yanukovych's economic plan. Diplomatic cables divulged by WikiLeaks show that Akhmetov put the minds of American officials at ease by identifying his candidate as a strong Mackenzie supporter. Mackenzie's economic proposal would tilt Ukraine towards the Western sphere of influence, and the Mackenzie name made it difficult to disbelieve. Yanukovych, after winning the presidency, fleeced the Ukrainian economy and drove it, according to Bogdanich and Forsyth, towards economic collapse. His Western realignment never materialized. Instead, Yanukovych sided with Russia, and the ensuing riots killed more than 80 protesters, kicking off a protracted period of political chaos, which has seen Russia invade Crimea, ramping up tensions between it and the West. Today, the Ukraine has become a major market for American arms. Yanukovych's successor, Petro Poroshenko, publicly praised Mackenzie for its 15 years of work in Ukraine, write Bogdanich and Forsyth. His daughter-in-law also worked for the company during most of his presidency. Pete Buttigieg, who worked at Mackenzie for 3 years, wrote in his autobiography, Shortest Way Home, that he took the position because he wanted to get an education in the real world. Presumably he did. I do not think it likely that Pete Buttigieg will become president. I do not think he does either. His present campaign is a win-win, a chance for a small-town mayor with obvious national aspirations to establish himself within the media, to develop credibility on par with political actors currently above his weight class. He'll make money, develop relationships with donors and party officials, lay groundwork. As a political actor, Buttigieg himself is spotless. He answers all questions in complete, articulate sentences, and always, always with empathy. New York Magazine asked him this year in a general way about Mackenzie's international entanglements. I think they have a lot of smart, well-intentioned people who sometimes view the world in a very innocent way, he said. That was practically the extent of the discussion. If I had to categorize my political upbringing, it would be Daily Show Democrat. My family voted for Gore, then Kerry, then Obama, and tuned in regularly to cable broadcasts which assured us that this decision was a main contributor to our intellectual superiority to the country around us. When 9/11 happened, when its terror multiplied into a profusion of exploding images, I remember what Jon Stewart said. Like Pete Buttigieg, he spoke with empathy. Any fool can blow something up, but to see these firefighters, these policemen, people from all over the country, literally with buckets, rebuilding, that is extraordinary. And that's why we've already won. It's light. It's democracy. They can't shut that down. It can't shut that down. That's what he said. They live in chaos. And chaos can't sustain itself. It never could. It's too easy and it's too unsatisfying. The view from my apartment was the World Trade Center, and now it's gone, and they attacked it. The symbol of American ingenuity and strength and labor and imagination and commerce, and it is gone. But you know what the view is now? The Statue of Liberty. The view from the south of Manhattan is the Statue of Liberty. You can't beat that. Let me tell you something every New Yorker knows. The Statue of Liberty sucks. It's tiny in comparison to the rest of the skyline. Its stated ideals are impossible to take seriously if you know even a little bit about the brutal mechanisms of commerce that run New York and America as a whole. To get in, you have to take a ferry, which costs money. The closest I've ever been to the thing was when I was at a garbage dump in Red Hook. The view from a garbage dump in Red Hook is the Statue of Liberty, and you can't beat that. It is we here in the global America who live in chaos. not some nebulous they. And Stewart is wrong. Chaos apparently can sustain itself. The chaos of September 11th has persisted for almost 20 years. I do not think older generations realize what has happened to their children and grandchildren growing up in the psychosphere of the post-9/11 world. Mass murder, assassination, and the fear of sudden, random death have become the backbone of our political and mass media cosmographies. When Saddam Hussein was hung, there was a general applause, and when Osama bin Laden was shot during the Obama administration, the campus of my small Southwestern university erupted into a riot of revelry. The students gathered in the quad, packed shoulder to shoulder, hugging and singing songs. Raised as we have been by journalism and televisual image, our catharsis is now the murder of enemies of the state. Mass murder, captured on video and rebroadcast with propagandistic intent, is the primary driver of our political opinions. I will speak for millennials at large here and say that as a whole, I have found us to be scared and bloodthirsty, and we tend to engage in politics as a form of public spectacle and performance art because that is what it has become for us. The president might be impeached on account of his Ukrainian entanglements. Joe Biden might be similarly crucified, albeit in the court of public opinion. But no matter who is president of the United States or who is president of Ukraine, McKinsey will have a seat at the table, and a lot of tables. And the actions of that firm and firms like it, along with the actions of the multinational corporations who are their primary employers, will not command the front pages or the hours of airtime on cable news networks. Politicians seem to exist now as a persistent distraction and a convenient scapegoat. Trump can be defeated in an election, Yanukovych can be ousted, but McKinsey and similar groups bear no public responsibility for the massive and catastrophic changes their designs have wrought upon the world. McKinsey, like the Sacklers, will never be held responsible for their role in the opioid crisis, nor will they answer for helping China seize control of neighboring territory through debt, or their role in the ongoing public suicide of the Ukraine. Jon Stewart's format of democratic talk comedy has replicated itself by mitosis too, growing like some new paramecium developed in a petri dish at Viacom. These shows mock politicians, not management consulting firms. Before the anniversary of 9/11 this year, the Trump administration attempted to hold secret peace talks between itself and the Afghan Taliban. They fell apart in a chaotic disarray of media attention, terrorist violence, and Trump's hawkish national security advisor, John Bolton, was fired in the aftermath. On September 10th, 2019, The Daily Show, now hosted by Trevor Noah, tweeted, "Imagine getting fired for the advice, don't throw a 9/11 party for the Taliban." The fear and the bloodshed and the corporate surveillance state that has risen on the back of more than 2,000 people martyred on September 11, 2001, will continue with the full participation of every sector of our media and our politics for the foreseeable future. Targets will change and its spokesmen will occasionally destroy themselves, but the fear will continue and the bloodlust and the rage as terror of this 21st century multiplies itself in an engine of prosperity whose beneficiaries will perhaps never be fully identified. That's light. That's democracy. And that's why we've already won. In Virtual Light, William Gibson imagines the Golden Gate Bridge taken over by squatters, a shanty town hanging around its cables and supports, built out of found materials. It is a place overflowing with Thomasons, woven out of them, a collection of once useful things separated from their original context and repurposed by human ingenuity. Deep lore from an article Gibson wrote in 1989. The street finds its uses for things. We are, all of us, living in the shadow of an oligarchical power structure which we cannot clearly perceive, much less control. But we have technology, resources, cultural detritus, and we can use them. Cyberpunk isn't about saving the world, wrote Pondsmith. It's about saving yourself. Buttigieg's 9/12 moment, that lost American unity, was the worst kind of fabrication. And by its propagandistic advancement, the corporate oligarchy has cloaked its ascent as a necessary result, a necessary response to the existential threat of a terror that, like Jon Stewart's they, has no precise identity. The bridge says to hell with unity. It spits on common political purpose. It was not designed nor built according to plan. It grew, piece by piece. Each of the human beings involved building the new structures out of refuse, the way a cell constructs its duplicates from unused peptides. It was not built, said Gibson. It was grown. I say to hell with unity and to hell with politics. I want reality to fracture. I want madmen and dreamers and Pepe the Frog spray painted on barricades against the mainland government in Hong Kong. I will admit that I am a cyborg and that more than half of my existence is conducted in the cyberspace which William Gibson first postulated in the early 1980s. Let fact become fiction and fiction fact until, as Horace prophesied, the hand and the foot have become united as in a sick man's dream. As a cyberpunk, wrote Mike Pondsmith, you grab technology by the throat and hang on. You become the car you drive, the gyro you fly, the gun you shoot. You dive headfirst into the net, using your mind to hurtle at light speed all over a vast network of data fortresses and artificial intelligence. With cyborg fingers, you pick computer locks. With enhanced senses, you see the future. Your enemies are corporate armies, cyborg biker gangs, power-armored assassins, and computer-wired netheads. Your weapons are nerve, street smarts, and bravado, and the Minami 10 smart gun on your hip. Now, I don't own a Minami 10 smart gun, but I do have a ThinkPad laptop with over a terabyte of anime reaction images, mostly berry pink. I attended graduate school here in New York, and it was there that I was trained for a role in the American upper middle class, with the openly stated provision that few slots were available and I would do well to brace myself for failure. The conclusion I arrived at following this education is that I existed on Earth only to serve as a temporary conduit for other people's money. I would rather be a conduit of information. Luckily, mass media broadcast devices are now pocket-sized and practically ubiquitous. Things are growing on this network that the anointed of our oligarchical society do not understand and cannot fathom, and over which they can exercise only weak and inconsistent control. Wake the fuck up, samurai. We got a planet to burn.